Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you about somewhere that's pretty important to me and I care a great deal about. I've been traveling down to the Falklands for almost 15 years now, and in fact I'm heading down there at the end of next week for another 3 weeks, which I'll chat a little bit about as we go on. As Sue said, I am a professional wildlife photographer. I have been so for over 20 years now, and for the last dozen of those, I've co-owned and run a fairly large UK-based but international in terms of where we go to wildlife photography holiday business called Nature's Images. So if you can see Nature's Images next to my little picture in this corner there, that's why, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But without further ado, let's crack on as far as the talk's concerned. And when talking about the Falklands, I think it's pretty important sometimes just to give everybody a little bit of context as to where it is, because it is, and as I know, because I'm not particularly looking forward to the flights involved in getting there that are pending in a week or so's time now. It's an awful long way from home. You can imagine the UK in that top right-hand corner of the globe, and it is all the way down to this bottom of South America, just north of the Antarctic Peninsula, that the Falkland Islands sits. And when you actually get there, I think a better phrase to describe the place is that it's more of an archipelago than a collection of islands. In fact, there are over 500 islands that go to make up the place. Many of those are little tiny dots that aren't even represented in the map that you can see here. There's two main ones, West Falkland and East Falkland, clearly dominate as far as the land mass is concerned. And in terms of population, which is not much bigger than a typical village here in the UK in terms of the islands overall, the vast majority, by which I mean 85% or so, live in the now city of Stanley. It was awarded city status last year in the last round of city status is being granted and things. So the city of Stanley, it makes me chuckle when I say that still, I have to say, because it's such a small, cozy little place that it really doesn't compare with what your perception of a city is. And well, even this populated places little map that I've got here, I know it goes back a bit, but it gives a sense of just how small the numbers are of where people are dotted around the islands. Over the course of the evening, you will hear a few islands being mentioned, and from a wildlife and bird point of view, it's pretty much all the stuff around the south and the west that the best locations for wildlife is concerned. You'll find everything everywhere, but the real hotspots are some places such as Sea Lion Island and Carcass Island and West Point and Steeple Jason out here and New Island, some of those. And that's principally because the prevailing weather systems here come in from the southwest. And so for seabirds nesting that want to take off into the wind, they need that south or southwesterly facing shore in order to be able to do so. Now, for most people, this is the map of the main map of the islands, but just over 40 years ago, in fact 41 years ago, 1982 it was, yes, where does time go, there was an attempt to turn the islands into a different set of names, the Las Malvinas, and here is an Argentinian map of exactly the same places, with a load of different place names for everywhere that I've just shown you on the previous map. Stanley doesn't exist anymore under this circumstance, it's Puerto Argentino. Yes, well, obviously we all know the story and the history as far as the invasion and the war is concerned there, and it didn't come to that, but it's still a running sore for a certain slice of the Argentinian population, that's for sure. And I have been across land border crossings in between Chile and Argentina, some of the more remote ones, not the big airports and things, just the land border ones, where actually a map of the Malvinas looking exactly like this is up on the wall in the customs office. So that's what they consider it still very much to be part of their country rather than an independent state in the way that it is at the moment. Now, when I first went down to the islands, actually the signs of the war were still very much to be seen. There were still big areas where you would see signs like this up, and areas were closed off as a consequence of the vast number of mines that were laid, particularly in the approach to Stanley. And it is only in 2020, so that is almost 40 years after those mines were laid, it was only in 2020 that the islands were actually declared mine-free. So it took 38 years to rid the place completely and utterly of mines. Most of that work was actually done by a small group of Zimbabwean mine clearers. Apparently Zimbabwe has some of the world's absolute experts and proponents of mine clearance. I guess they've had plenty of history and experience of that within their own country. And actually when the last mines were cleared, the Zimbabweans and their families who'd been involved in the project, they'd come for the summer season and then go back to Zimbabwe for the winter, because there's no way you can really clear mines in the winter down in the Falklands. It's too cold and the ground's too hard. But at the end of the whole process, they were offered honorary citizenship of the islands. And so I can imagine the debate in those little family households of, do we stay in Stanley or do we go back to Harare? I suspect it probably didn't last very long, and they're all living in Stanley now and enjoying life and the benefits of all their hard work clearing the mines away. But those mines are all gone, but the special nature of the place, to me at a personal level, absolutely hasn't. And about 18 months ago, in the run-up to the 40th anniversary of the war, I produced this particular book, which I will talk a little bit more about at the very end, because hopefully one or two of you might be interested in it. And it was produced in collaboration with Falklands Conservation, who are sort of the equivalent of the RSPB as far as the islands are concerned. And what I was really keen to do, and hopefully what I'm going to share with you folks this evening as well, is just how amazingly special these islands are in terms of the nature of the place and the wildlife there, and why it really does need looking after and protecting and celebrating too. And for me as a photographer, I'm often asked the question, what's your favorite thing that you photographed? And I always say to people, actually, the best question is not to ask me what the favorite thing that I photographed is, because I'll always tell you the last thing that I photographed, because I enjoy whatever it is that I'm photographing. But a better question to ask me would be, if you could only ever go to one place or photograph in one place again, and that's it for the rest of your days, you can't photograph anywhere other than that one location, where would it be? And the answer to that for me would be the Falkland Islands. And part of that is because it's extraordinarily empty and remote and wild in terms of the places. And that appeals to me. It's not that I don't like people. I'm very happy with people, but I'm also extremely happy being in places where there aren't many people, but there's plenty of wildlife. And that really sums up the vast majority of the locations that I get to spend time in working in the islands here. And when it comes to the wildlife here is so confiding, as in it really doesn't give two figs about your presence. It just gets on with life, because people are just a tiny little part of what comes into their daily existence. A little bit like going to a puffin colony. Any seabird colony here in the UK, they're generally speaking not bothered by people. And when those locations, you're the only person there, or there might be only 2 or 3 people there, they're really not bothered. And as a consequence, as a photographer, I haven't got to worry about finding things. I haven't got to worry about being able to sit where I want to when it comes to photographing things. I know I'm in a location where the weather is going to change constantly, which is what provides all the opportunities in terms of the dynamism of light and drama that comes from the environment. And as a consequence, photographically, I am simply constrained by my own imagination. And as a result, I know I would never get bored when it came to photographing here. So that's why it's my #1 go-to. You know, if I could only ever photograph in one place anymore, it would be here. And this little image of a Magellanic penguin on a beach is really sort of typical, hopefully, of trying to get across some of that wonderful sense of isolation. And this close-up portrait of a black-browed albatross, and we'll see plenty more of albatross and penguins, obviously, over the course of the evening. This is really to sort of confirm the fact that actually you can get extraordinarily close to and work with subjects that really don't have any concern about you being there. Well, this bird's fast asleep and completely unbothered by me sitting there and fiddling around with the composition to get that absolutely perfect as I particularly wanted in order to capture it. Now, talk to most people about the Falklands, and very much the first family of birds that comes to mind is penguins. And they have actually got 5 different species of penguins that breed there. The ones that always come to mind, I think if you stopped a non-birding person in the high street and asked them to describe a penguin, this is one of the ones that they would almost certainly describe. This is a king penguin, sort of like a mini version of the emperor, so to speak. And I've often pondered why that might be. And the only conclusion I can come to is because it's on the chocolate biscuits that we've all had since we were kids and things as well. That's the penguin that's drawn on there, and therefore the first thing you think of when it comes to penguins. So yes, there are king penguins to be found in the islands. There are also it's an important region for breeding as far as rockhopper penguins are concerned too, and their whole process of coming to shore, as you can tell from this particular image, is fraught with drama, and we'll talk about some of those dramas a little bit later on in this first half of the talk as well. There's also a significant number of gentoo penguins here. These are the showboaters, the ones that love to fling themselves to shore in a very, very dramatic manner. This one here is clearly trying to do a Hawaii 5-0 impression in some way, shape or form in terms of surfing in on this particular wave. But that's very, very typical of gentoos coming ashore. But although penguins were very, very much at the heart of what everybody thinks of when it comes to the bird life and the wildlife of the islands, actually, as a photographer, I tend to look a little bit beyond just the species. Although, you know, I initially my fascination with the natural world began with as a bird watcher with binoculars in my hand as a teenager. So I'm very conscious and aware of different species. But as a photographer, I look for slightly different things. And one of the things that really appeals to me about working in the islands and the bird life to be found there is there's a wonderful array of different color palettes to be found, whether that's from the birds or whether that's from the backgrounds and the environments to be found there. So this little pastiche of a combination of cormorants and penguins and plovers and dotterels and terns and things is really just to give a sense of that array of different colors that I look for and I like to work with. I love to try to get backgrounds that complement what I'm photographing in terms of a subject as well. And I'm going to touch quite a bit through the talk this evening about my thought processes when it comes to photographing things, as well as talking about some of the individual species as well. And I did mention earlier about the proximity of things and the ability to be able to sit quietly and frankly let stuff come to you. And this is a classic example of that. This is a striated caracara, actually one of the rarest raptors on the planet, and I think it's in excess of 75 to 80% of the world population is to be found in the islands. They refer to them locally as Johnny Rooks. And actually they're a bit of a pain. They'll pick anything apart, they'll destroy stuff. I've had bits pulled off tripods, I've had bits pulled off camera bags. I've seen Land Rovers and vehicles where they've pulled all they regularly pull all the windscreen wipers and things. In fact, you can't leave windscreen wipers on Land Rovers and if you're on an island where there's striated caracaras, because they'll simply rip them off when you're not there. But the point I'm making is it's a little bit smaller than a common buzzard here in the UK in terms of size. And this is not a cropped image. This is me just sitting, not even with my longest lens, and letting a bird and its natural curiosity sort of bring it over to me in order to be able to do a close-up portrait like that. Now, the thought of being able to sit like that and photograph a common buzzard here in the UK, forget it. It's just not going to happen. And so in terms of the contrast as to what makes this place so special to work photographically. Excuse me, this is a really classic example of it. And that close-up work and that close-up opportunity, as a photographer, it means that I'm able to think much more in the way that I would do if I were a portrait photographer. I'm not just capturing the whole of the subject. I'm able to work with subjects at distances which allow me to capture those sort of portrait type thought processes and portrait type images, either of the individual in the case of the Caracara, or of the courting couple of black-browed albatross that we see here. I'm also able to work with wide angle lenses and actually look to really incorporate the environment into the pictures as well. And that tells a whole host of different stories. And much of the work that I've done over my career that's with wide angles and wildlife has had to be on a remote basis. So, you know, using a camera release or a camera trap or something of that ilk in order to be able to do it. But I don't have to worry about that here. I'm able to comfortably sit down and just get myself comfortable, and the individual bird, in this instance, the black-browed albatross that I'm photographing on its nest, getting it comfortable with me. This is an image that sort of really resonates for me. It was actually the very first black-browed albatross colony that I went to when I first went down to the islands. And if you'd said to, I don't know, 14, 15-year-old me that you're going to go and sit in an albatross colony, I would have laughed, because I was very aware of the birds as a family, but it was all completely down the other end of the planet, and so beyond my own personal scope of something that I might ever get to see. This is in the days before Albert turned up at Bempton, I just never crossed my mind that would happen. And so when I first headed down to the islands and to this particular colony, which is quite a small one, it's on a little island called West Point, and I wandered from where I'd got off the boat across to where the colony was. And I was so blown away with where I was, I just went to the edge of the colony, found the first bird that was there, which was this particular individual, and I just sat down, and I couldn't take my camera out of the bag for almost an hour, because I was just in awe of the fact that I'm sitting here in this location and I've got this unbelievably confiding and incredibly beautiful bird just sitting there completely and utterly unbothered by the fact that I'm there. So this chart, the sort of opportunities to work with environmental shots such as this are a large part of what make this place very special. And working with those shorter lenses also gives the opportunity to create some fun pictures too. This is a young elephant seal pup, and I'll talk a lot more about elephant seals in a little bit. In order to take this particular image, this one was absolutely fast asleep. I put a slightly funky fisheye lens on and then just crawled the last 15 meters or so on my belly and held the camera out in front of me so that I wasn't completely and utterly in its face, and then just waited for the nostril to open. The key to me with the picture was having a nostril, as it was breathing or snorting or whatever it was going to be doing, to really be large in the center of the face there. And if you look at the other nostril though, you'll see that there's an awful lot of sandy, wet muck all around it. Because when an elephant seal pup or any elephant seals are as fast asleep, they will very constantly look to clear sand and salt out of their nostrils. And then that involves a very strong type noise and blowing out through the nostrils. And a lot of it gets gathered around the nostril that you can see at the bottom there. But if your camera's too close or you're too close as a photographer, well, it often ends up all over you. I have on more than one occasion been completely and utterly covered in elephant seal pup snot. And trust me, it's not a particularly nice experience. But anyway, it was fun for this particular picture. Most importantly, having taken the shots, I crawled away on my stomach as well. That's really important when you're doing this sort of thing. You don't just crawl in to get yourself where you want to be and then stand up and walk away when it's all over and completely spook the subject that you've enjoyed those few moments with. Show some respect and crawl away in the same way so that there's no disturbance at all. Anyway, fun stuff with wide angle lenses. So those are the kit. That hopefully all of that lot gives you a bit of context as to why I love this place so much and the sort of opportunities that it offers me as a photographer. But let's dive in and talk a little bit about photographing penguins there. And I always say to people who come on any of the trips with me to photograph anything, anywhere in the world, when it comes to photographing any wildlife, it's really, really important that you get yourself, if humanly possible, to be at the same height as the subject that you're photographing, so that your image is this sort of plane, you at the same height as as the subject. Because if you're looking downwards, either from a vehicle or because you're standing up, then the feel of the image is one of you imposing yourself on the subject. It's far more engaging and far more intimate if you can be at the same height of the subject that you're photographing. So even if it's a wet, sandy beach, that means sitting down on the beach. In fact, it means going beyond that and lying on the beach in my instance, because the difference between sitting on a beach and therefore photographing from 18 inches to 2 foot above the ground and putting your camera literally flat down onto the beach and photographing a few inches above the ground is huge. And you can see it as you look at this picture of this Gentoo penguin in comparison to the king penguins that I showed you earlier. Here, my camera is on the floor, and in fact, it almost feels as if you're looking up at the subject. But what that also does, as well as giving you a far more engaging image as far as the Gentoo penguin itself is concerned, what it also does is it opens up the background of the sky. And I'll go back to the previous shot. Instead of it being quite a narrow field to what's behind the penguins, as soon as you're down lower and you're looking up, you've got a wonderful canvas in the background. And one of the styles of shot, particularly with penguins on beaches, that I'm a huge fan of is not just looking at the penguin, but trying to subtly, it's in an out of focus manner, because I don't want it to distract from the penguin, but subtly have aspects of the background visible in the image and very clear in the image that give a strong sense of where you are or where that penguin was when that picture was taken. And by that, I mean the waves that you can see breaking behind it and that lovely sort of slate grey sky that's creeping up into the background. Here is another example of what I mean. Here is another Gentoo penguin, and this one's running towards me on the beach. You can see quite a lot of sand blowing around in the bottom of the picture as well. But subtly, it's not slapping you in the face, but the more you look at that background, you will get a sense of just how big and how dramatic some of those waves are that are crashing behind it. And so, although the picture is very much about the Gentoo that's running towards you, you really now have much more of a sense of where that's coming from and what's going on in terms of the place that it is. I look very hard to make sure that aspects of the background don't distract. And in this instance, although there's a very strong blue line from the sea, you can see a line of white surf on the edge of the beach, a strong line of the sea behind the breaking waves, and then the whitish sky above it. I look very carefully to make sure that any horizon type lines in there that are quite strong, because they can be quite distracting. I make sure that they're not going through an important part of the bird. So in this instance, if I'd been a little bit lower, then I would have got that horizon running straight through the middle of the head, the face, the beak, the eye, and all that, and it would have been a little bit of a distraction. So just taking care to look beyond the subject into the background to make sure that it's not actually going to be a problem as far as the main reason that the image is being taken. This is a Magellanic penguin, just for completeness. I think it's the first one. Oh, other than that little tiny one that I showed you in the intro, it's the first Magellanic penguin of the evening. And when all those elements come together, you can end up with some really, really dramatic pictures. And there's another little group of Magellanic penguins. And this was a fairly extraordinary day as far as the wind was concerned. There'd been a big storm the day before, so there was a lot of swell coming through and huge waves crashing onto the beach. But the wind had flipped round completely in the opposite direction and was blowing really strongly. So it was blowing off the shore and onto the waves. So as these big waves were breaking, there was a huge amount of spray being flung off the top of them and away from the beach as well at the same time. So that with that jet black sky, jet dark grey sky that you can see there as well, actually if it wasn't for all of that stuff going on in the background, whilst it would have been a nice image of a group of Magellanic penguins, it would have just been a line of penguins across the bottom of a picture. And that's all we would have ended up with. It's the dramatic sea and the sky that goes with it that makes the image really, really work as far as I'm concerned. And that only is achievable by lying flat on the floor. If I'd been 2 to 3 foot above the ground, or God forbid, 6 foot and standing up, none of that would have shown in the image. So that's why I prattle on quite religiously about you've got to be at the height of the subjects that you're photographing. It isn't just about the birds, though, and certainly for those penguins coming ashore onto the beaches, they face some challenges, and the biggest form of challenge that they face comes in the form of southern sea lions. And here's a couple of male southern sea lion portraits just to confirm why they got that name in the first place, that sort of shaggy mane of fur that they have around their heads. They're not the prettiest of creatures, that for sure, and they're pretty noisy and they're pretty smelly too, but that's another story. And on one of the beaches that I visit pretty much every time that I go down to the islands, about 5 or 6 years ago, one of the male sea lions there, southern sea lions there, started being a regular hunter of penguins at dawn. And so his routine would be just before the sun came up, he would arrive just offshore and he would swim all the way along the beach, just off the shore, and then all turn around and come all the way along and back again. And he wasn't looking for penguins in the surf. He was looking for penguins that were either approaching the waves or standing, resting, having just come out of the waves. Because in the water, the penguin's always going to get away from him. But providing he didn't have a greater distance between him and the penguin of probably about 40 or 50 meters over land, he would outrun them. And so he would come charging out the sea. He would chase after a penguin. And in this first year that he started terrorizing this particular beach and set of colonies, his hunting technique was simply chase them down, and as soon as I've caught up with them, grab them. And that's what you can see him doing here with this Magellanic penguin. He's grabbed it at the first possible opportunity, which is by the feet, because that's the closest thing to him as the penguin's trying to scuttle away. That does cause problems for him, or did cause problems for him, because the penguin at that point is still actually quite mobile and flexible. And you can see here, this one here is trying to turn around and defend itself. Unfortunately, in this one's instance, it bent the wrong way. But I have seen, the pictures were not great because it was all a bit too far away, one spin round the other way and peck this sea lion in the eye or around the eye area, which caused the sea lion to yelp, I assume, because he let go of the penguin, and the penguin then managed to scuttle away and get away from the experience altogether. And so it was with a sort of like a sense of fascination and respect, dare I say it, for the sea lion's intelligence, that when I went back the following season and he was still there, he'd changed his technique. He'd improved it. He'd fine-tuned it. Here he's got a king penguin as opposed to a Magellanic, but rather than grabbing the feet at the first opportunity of catching up with a penguin, he'd wait another 3 or 4 strides, by which time he was more alongside it, and he'd grab it by the head rather than the feet. And that way, the bird has absolutely no defense mechanism left whatsoever. And so all he has to do is waddle his way back to the sea, which is where he's going to take it to then consume it. So while all this stuff is quite morbid and it's really quite difficult to watch, it sort of goes with the territory of being a professional wildlife photographer, that you see sort of nature in the red and tooth and claw type dynamic as well. I was genuinely fascinated and full of respect for the way this particular individual thought through the issues he'd had in one season and fine-tuned his approach for the following season as well. And he was still there when I was last down in the islands, which was in January this year, so the last breeding season. So it's going to be fascinating to see if he's still hunting and causing chaos on this particular beach when I rock up there in a couple of weeks' time. Now, for those birds coming ashore onto the beaches, those are the sorts of challenges that they face. But for the rockhoppers coming ashore, well, they don't tend to come ashore on a beach type environment, and that brings a whole array of different challenges. Whilst this one here is having a little bit of a doze on the top of some cliffs on a little rock, and it's a fairly benign sea, this one here is staring at a sea that's far from benign. It's pretty rough and challenging, and you can sort of see him contemplating, do I really want to be heading out into that right now? Because that's what I know I need to be doing. Well, I'm going to put a little bit of context in this for you as well. This is pretty typical. It's not a huge colony, but it's pretty typical of the sort of setting that rockhopper colonies are to be found in the islands. This is the little colony on an island called Sea Lion Island. Hopefully you can see my mouse as I rave it around the sort of bottom center of the screen. This is the colony, all in this little area that I'm encircling down here as well. So it's about 100 birds all told. There's sometimes a few more that nest over here, and there's been a few more over here in the past as well. But generally speaking, this is the hot spot of the colony. But for the birds that are breeding on the top of these cliffs being probably about 50 to 60 foot high from sea level, the only way up is over here. So basically they have to make their way up these 50 to 60 foot high cliffs and then walk their way all the way around to here. And when the sea looks fairly benign on a day like this, that doesn't look too much of an issue. But when the sea looks like this, which is very much the norm at least 50% of the time during the breeding season, then clearly life is going to be one hell of a challenge for a bird that has got to make its way out and climb up this little ridge that we're talking about here. So this wave breaking here is going to be breaking at the top of that 25, 30 feet into the air, and we're talking about a bird that's only about 18 inches high. So that's fairly challenging for it in terms of being able to make its way through that sort of violent sea and clamber up a cliff. But there they are, they do it. And standing at the top of the cliffs and watching these little birds literally being hurled around like tennis balls in the water is really sort of, it puts your heart in your mouth every single time. And if I ever found myself in some sort of surreal sort of computer game scenario where you have to pick a species from the animal kingdom that's going to be in your side in this virtual war that's raging the planet, I'd want rockhoppers on my side, because quite frankly, they never give up. They simply just get hurled around in the waves. And as soon as a sense of flattening out of the top of the chaos that's there, then they spot the opportunity and bang, they're heading for the base of the cliffs. And I have seen them hurled 30 or 40 foot into the air, tumble down, land back in the sea, just shake them off and have a go again as well. They're just absolutely extraordinary to watch them going round and around in this sort of washing machine type environment and head to the base of the cliffs in order to start clambering up. And when they get there, then they've got an almost sort of like vertical cliff to climb up, and they've only got flippers, claws and beaks in order to be able to help them to do it. And they've got to do it really fast as well before the next wave comes crashing and pulls them down and drags them back down into the sea. And it's terrible sometimes to see them almost at the top of where the waves are breaking and just about to get to the safe zone, so to speak, and the next wave just simply drags them and pulls them back down into the void down below. It's dramatic stuff. And real heart in the mouth moments at times, and extraordinary birds and extraordinary behavior. Life in a Gentoo penguin colony, by contrast, is considerably more peaceful. It's a lot quieter. There's even a chance in this particular parent to have a little bit of a doze and a nap. The height of drama here is when one bird pinches a little bit of nest material from another bird's nest without the other one noticing, and then there can be handbags at 10 paces as they have a right old squabble over a bit of weed or a stone or whatever it might be that's been pinched in order to protect an egg in any way, shape or form. So it really does make the challenges of rockhoppers coming back and spending time at the nest sort of pale into insignificance, that's for sure. But in the Gentoos' favour, when they do actually hatch their eggs, I have to say their chicks are amongst the absolute cutest that there are possible to be. This little individual here is just probably a couple of days old, something of that sort of ilk. And really, really drop dead gorgeous to see that poking itself out when mum or dad decides that they just need a little bit of a stretch, and Junior pokes its head out as well. They always lay 2 eggs, and that's very much an insurance mechanism. I think it's less than 1 in terms of the overall average that makes it through to adulthood. And we'll talk about the predation of chicks and eggs in the second half of the talk. But when you get to see a couple of chicks with a parent at a nest, well, as I say, they're pretty drop dead gorgeous as far as chicks are concerned. Certainly from my point of view, that's for sure. But they grow up quite quickly. All the Gentoos down there now will be sat on eggs, and I would think during the course of November, just creeping into December, but pretty much by the end of November, most of the eggs will have hatched. Stick another 4 weeks onto it, and Junior starts to look like this one here in the foreground, and very much a mini me of the outer focus parent that you can see behind, and really starting to resemble in lots and lots of different ways the adult that it's going to turn into. And teenage Gentoos really don't quite have the same appeal as the little tiny teeny ones as well, because they actually take on many of the characteristics of teenage kids here. And I say that in as much as they will now be being left on their own rather than mum or dad sitting on them to protect them. They're considered big enough to look after themselves during the course of the day. And so mum or dad will disappear off first thing in the morning and go off on an extremely long swim, leave them to hang around with other teenage chicks and either lie there and sleep or just muck about and just sort of get on with life, so to speak. And they look pretty blooming miserable. They look like most teenage kids that you see hanging around on the high street. You know, you can almost see a Harry Enfield type shrug of the shoulders of this one, sort of waiting for mum or dad to come back. Very, very bored, very, very fed up. But when mum or dad does come back, it's unbelievably comical because they've been out all day. They've swum God knows how many miles and come back with a gullet full of fish, a crop full of fish, and all Junior wants to do is get food off them, and all they want to do is to have a little bit of a rest before they pass the food over. And you get some fantastic sights of the youngsters literally chasing mum and dad up and down the beach, just hassling them and harassing them. And it's like a Benny Hill sketch in terms of watching them sort of chasing each other around until the parent reluctantly turns around and says, okay, you can have a bit if it means you're going to shut up. And that's what you can see going on here, that little tapping at the base of the beak before a bit of regurgitation takes place. So there you go, that's Gentoos for you. The last of the penguins that I'm going to highlight in this particular section is the kings. And I have to say, you know, I was a bit cheeky talking about penguin biscuits and all that sort of things. But when it comes to the colourfulness of a king penguin, then it's second to none. Really, really extraordinary markings. I mean, why on earth it feels the need to have that extraordinary coloration and gradation of colour on its neck that you can see here. It's really, really spectacular. And when this bird had lifted its head up and it was in lovely evening light as well, then I just had to capture the lines and beautiful textures of colours and an array of colours and things that are there to be seen. They only lay 1 egg. And in fact, they only breed every other year. The breeding cycle for a king penguin is pretty unique, and it takes over 12 months from laying an egg to finally fledging the chick. And as a consequence, they don't get a chance to breed that second year. So they'll go through a big traumatic molt, reset all their feathers and things as well, and then have a nice long winter looking after themselves, fattening up, and then coming back and starting the process all over again. They'll lay a single egg, and that single egg will sit in a pouch on their feet. They'll pass it from parent to parent while the other party is off feeding out at sea during the incubation period. They don't really need to do it here in the Falklands because the ground's not that cold. It's not like the emperors on the ice in Antarctica, but they're evolved for it, and it's what they do. And they will be laying eggs over the next few weeks down in the Falklands now. And then in early January, those eggs will hatch. And well, I think it's fair to say that in comparison to the Gen 2s, the king penguin chick, the newly born king penguin chick, isn't going to win any beauty pageants. You know, I'm not going to quite go as far as to say only a mother king penguin could ... But you sort of get the drift. They're not the prettiest, and they don't quite get so many oohs and ahs from an audience if I'm talking in a hall type environment. But when you see them a little bit bigger, and when you see that wonderful interaction between chick and parent, a little tender moments such as this, then, well, actually, it doesn't really matter what they look like, because those tender moments are just fantastic to see and fantastic to witness, and even more challenging and enjoyable to try and capture and record in the way that this particular image does. But like all youngsters, they grow up too. And it's not going to be too long until the teenage version of a king penguin chick looks something like this. Well, it's very oversized and it's very fluffy. But that's for a reason, because at the end of the summer and going into autumn, mum and dad are going to start to leave it considerably more. And in fact, during the winter months, there will probably be one, maybe two, maybe even longer month spell where they're not going to see mum and dad at all. The challenge and the distances and the weather conditions are such that coming back regularly to feed Junior is just beyond their capabilities. And so they rely on the fact that in that first 6 months of life, it's going to pile on an awful amount of poundage, which you can see this one has done, and grow this thick coat of fluffy feathers to provide some insulation and warmth to get through the winter storms. And then all the chicks will crush up together and try to keep themselves warm, when the weather gets really, really challenging. And around this time of the year, last month as well, over the last few weeks, the parents will have started coming back quite regularly, and they'll be refeeding up and refattening up the chicks. And over the next few weeks, these fellas will start their molting process. This is the process of being fattened up again. And here we go. There's one not necessarily being looked after particularly well by fellow king penguins. And here's one that's started that molt process. And it's a little bit like a teenager in reverse. Whereas a teenager here might start to sprout some facial hair, here it's gradually losing its facial hair, but the overall look and feel is the same. And maybe this parent on the right-hand side has decided you're big enough to look after yourself now. And over the next few weeks, then all that molting will finish as far as those chicks are concerned, and they'll be introduced to the sea. Mum and dad will have a molt themselves, and then they'll be off independently looking after themselves as we head into the new year from a calendar year point of view. So those are the penguins, but there are also a fair amount of mammals to be found in the islands, but actually the only mammals that should be there are mammals that are marine based. There are no natural land-based mammals that should be in the Falklands. That doesn't mean you won't find them. There's one island that's got a Patagonian grey fox on it. There's a couple of the big islands have got hares and rabbits on, but they've all been brought there by people. It's only really mammals around the coast that should be there. It's a fantastic place for cetaceans. I've never been out on a small boat or any boat anywhere around the islands and not had a dolphin of some sort come and check it out. This is a Commerson's dolphin, one of the two most regulars to be found there. The other is Peel's dolphin. But they'll regularly come and check you out, and you'll very often see them from the shore swimming in the waves and things as well. So absolutely wonderful to see dolphins and sei whales and other whale species during the course of the year there as well. But there are also a lot of mammals that come ashore for breeding purposes. I talked about southern sea lions earlier. but their big relatives are these fellows, the elephant seals. And although I showed you an elephant seal pup that I crawled up to with a fisheye lens, I'm not doing that when it comes to a big ugly male such as this particular individual here. This was taken with a nice long lens and a nice sensible safe distance, because these are fairly big brutes. These ones here are actually juveniles. I mean, they're sub-adults, so to speak. But you can see that they're all going through the practice and the process of learning how to fight, because fighting for the harem and fighting for the right to breed is essential as far as elephant seal life is concerned. This particular image always reminds me of what makes me think of going to a boxing gym. And you've got like 3 little rings set up where there's some sparring going on. You can see those obviously. And then the fat one lying in the middle, he's the trainer who's busy barking out orders to, you know, jab him from the left, come from the right, etc., to the 3 sets of sparring seals that you've got there. They're not pretty animals when they're adults, but when they're youngsters, they're super cute. I reckon Walt Disney modeled pretty much all of his characters on elephant seal pups, because the big eyes in relation to the size of the face really make elephant seal pups absolutely drop dead gorgeous. And that was a key element of how Disney designed Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, etc., was big eyes in relation to the size of the face. And if I'm ever really having a challenging day and I'm feeling a bit flat and I'm feeling a bit miserable and I want to put a smile back onto my face, then I only have to pick this picture up off my phone and have a look at it, because it always makes me warm inside and it always makes me smile. I mean, that is contentment personified as far as I'm concerned. I mean, not only is he clearly having an amazing dream, he's deeply asleep, but look at the smile on his face. So, you know, it's a special dream. He's in a really, really happy place. And how can anybody not smile when they look at a face that's as happy and content as that is? Now, I talked a little bit earlier, and this is the last part of the first part of the talk. I talked a little bit earlier about sort of really wanting to go and see albatross and how special that was for me. And amongst the many little locations where there are albatross colonies to be found in the islands, one particular location is really, really unique and special. It's an island called Steeple-Jason. If you remember the map I showed you at the beginning, it's right up in the top left-hand corner. It's really, really remote. It's uninhabited. There's just a tiny little research station that's there that doesn't have people in it all the year by any means. And you can't fly to the island. You have to go by boat. It's about a 5-hour boat ride from the nearest other island to get there. Some of the most dangerous currents and things in the archipelago are around it. So it's a real challenge. But it is an amazing place to get to, because this island, Steeple-Jason, is home to the largest breeding colony of any albatross species anywhere in the world. I'm talking over 200,000 pairs of birds. So at peak, if they were all there, all the adults were in and all the chicks were there sitting on their nests at the same time, that's over 500,000 birds. And the colony is from one end to the other, it stretches around the coast for 4.5 miles. That is just vast. And as you go through it, that particular image is taken at one end of the colony. You can't even see that patch of birds. This is taken at the other end of the colony altogether. And if you look carefully at that image, that line of white that you can see stretching off around the shore, all the way around the corner and disappearing behind the hill, that is all breeding albatross sitting on nests all the way along the shore. And that other picture, the previous picture, is way round to the right-hand side of that spine of hills that runs down the middle of the island. So it's a huge colony and just an extraordinary place to be. When it comes to photographing in places like this, I try to apply a whole array of different techniques. One is slightly counterintuitive, and that's to stick the longest lens possible that I've got onto the camera, because long lenses compress perspective and it makes everything look as if it's even more on top of each other than it is. So this is taken as a tiny section of the colony, taken with a really long lens to really show you just what create that impression of just how on top of each other all these birds are. They're very tolerant within a certain radius of their nests and things. And if you wander into that radius, then they'll have a bit of a snap at one another and they'll have an argument about it. But beyond that, then they're pretty tolerant. But you can see the density of birds, and you just imagine that for 4.5 miles running around the coast. It's extraordinary. Anyway, long lenses is one way, but also using a long lens to pick little details out. And amongst the most obvious little detail is the eyebrow of a black-browed albatross. The technique here is shooting through other birds. So all this mushy stuff that you can see on the left and the bottom of the picture is actually another bird sitting on a nest in front of the one that I've concentrated on the eyebrow of. And I've used that really just to soften the scene and soften the image down, because the image is all about that eyebrow and what an eyebrow it is. I defy any Hollywood makeup artist to apply mascara quite that beautifully. It's really, really beautiful and extraordinary. And every single bird, and trust me, because I've photographed, I don't know how many eyebrows of these things, every single bird has a slightly different connotation and combination of greys and where the lines are and where they start and where they end. They're all unique as far as their marking, individual markings are concerned, very subtly, but I'm sure that's part of how they tell the difference between individuals within the colony as well. The second technique is to put a short lens on and try to give a sense of place. And in this instance, what I've done is I've gone to the edge of the colony. I've got an adult with its chick, and I've actually used that pair of birds to obscure the colony that's sort of spreading out behind it. You know, it's one that's on the edge, but I'm now able to give much more of a sense of isolation. The fact that it was also somewhere where I could capture that iconic ridge that runs down the middle of the island that gives Steeple Jason its name in the image as well was again one of the reasons why I picked that particular nest to go and spend a little bit time on. So using a wide angle works quite well, and also using a wide angle and looking up into the sky, so you get that sense of looking up into the other of the albatross's wonderful environments, which is the sky. And an image like that looks very simple, but actually the key to an image like that isn't so much the chick sitting on the nest, it's where all the other birds that are flying around in the sky are. And that takes an awful lot of time. So I think from memory, I must have spent half an hour, 45 minutes just lying at the base of this nest, not so much with one eye on the chick, but another eye very much on the sky, watching birds flying in and trying to get patterns and shapes of flying birds that complemented the birds sitting on the nest. And when it comes to wide angles, then, you know, actually, I'm always a big fan of trying to capture that sense of environment and things going on as well. And in this instance, if I'd tried to be a little bit further back in order to capture all of those huge wings when it opens up, then actually the image would have, the birds would have been really, really small in the frame and it just wouldn't work. So I'm quite happy with the wing disappearing out into the top right-hand corner. But there is one little thing that I just wanted to point out to you in this image, and it shows just how obsessive well, I am as a photographer, and maybe that's part of looking at things with a professional eye as well. When you're photographing a setting like this, number one, you've got to really, really make sure that your horizon is straight, and that's really quite hard to do. But the one little nuance on the horizon that was absolutely critical for me was making sure there was a space between the end of that headland and the chest of that bird. If the chest of that bird had cut across the headland, the image wouldn't have worked for me. It wouldn't have worked in the same way. That tiny little sense of space in there just balances off everything in terms of where you are. Now, that works at a subliminal level. You might not have even noticed it until I pointed it out, but those are the sort of little details that I obsess about and I concentrate on very, very hard when I'm busy photographing albatross or whatever it may be. But one of the ingredients that is absolutely essential to photography is the light. And you can see that the light at the end of the day here on Steeple Jason can completely change the nature and the feel of the images that you can take. And in the Falklands, that golden hour that every photographer refers to at the beginning and the end of the day, particularly the end, is absolutely exceptional. And it can really sort of punch you in the eyes at times. This is a Magellanic oyster catcher, but it's in the last rays of the setting sun, and it completely transforms the image. And the end of the day light also gives you the chance to explore a whole new genre of photography in terms of silhouettes and things as well. And this rockhopper silhouetted, just sort of almost nodding towards the setting sun, is typical of that. And when you come back after either just a toilet break or a cup of tea, then I'm going to talk a lot more about the light, and I hope you've enjoyed the first half of the talk. Before the interval, I was talking a little bit about light, and how important light is when it comes to oops, there we go. Let's get that. There we go. When it comes to photographing, A, generally, and B, here in the islands. And so for me, that light is either fantastic at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. And I personally prefer the end of the day, because at the beginning of the day, it's lovely first thing, but then it's getting worse as the sun comes up. Whereas at the end of the day, it just gets better and better and better until suddenly it's gone. So that's just a slightly psychological thing. And so my routine here during my time is that my alarm is set for 4 o'clock every morning. And at 4 o'clock, I'll look out of the window. And if I can see the stars, then I'll get up. If I can't see the stars, then and I'm absolutely sure that I can't see the stars, and I'll have checked the weather forecast before I go to bed anyway, then I'll get back under the covers, and I'll have set myself a second alarm for about 4:45, 4:50, something of that ilk. That's because that's around the time that the sun comes up. Whereas at 4 o'clock, if it's clear, then it's before the sun's up, and I want to be where I want to be when the sun actually pops up. At 4:50, if it's still completely thick cloud, or it's raining, then I go back to bed, unless I'd really decided that I want some rainy type shots that morning, because those sort of mornings don't come around very often. And I'm quite grateful to have the chance for a little bit of a lie-in every so often, because I generally won't have gone to bed until somewhere between 11 and 12 o'clock anyway, because the same thing's happening at the back end of the evening. And in terms of that morning light, it often has a sort of pinkish hue to it just before the sun comes up. Down here, it's sort of got a slightly pinkish hue to it, and that's really what you can see. This is just pre-dawn light, or just after the sun's up light, on this little two-banded plover. And I thought some of the smaller birds deserved a little bit of a mention in this second half of the talk. It's not just about the penguins and the albatross, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, as I said, the light just gets better and better and better. And sometimes that light is just so intense that it literally thumps you in the face. And that's what happened in this particular instance here. And this is on an island called New Island, and it's probably one of the hardest islands to get to in terms of the logistics of the place. And I got the opportunity to go and stay there for 10 days a few years or so ago, and I stayed in the research station there. It's got some amazing cliffs, and it's got a fairly sizable albatross population, black-browed albatross population, all along those cliffs. So on the first couple of days that I was there, I walked the whole lot of them in order to work out where the best nests and combination of nesting birds in relation to the environment was, because I knew the sort of images that I wanted to get. And from that point on, every single evening, I would go and sit there for the last sort of couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours of the day, as far as the light was concerned. And on this particular day, it had been a miserable day. It had been grey, drizzly, rainy, no hint of the sun at all. And so I wandered over. It was part of the routine I'd established for myself. So I wandered over and sat down, not expecting too much, but gazing over at the horizon, which is off to the right-hand side of the image, and thinking, I'm sure there's a little crack, I'm sure there's going to be a little opening, and I'm sure the sun will come through at some point. Well, it did, and it was for a sum total of 50 seconds, and it was literally just as the sun was on the verge of popping over the horizon. So it was right at the end of everything. It suddenly burst through with that intense brightness that comes of a sun that's been hidden for pretty much the whole of the day and is very, very low on the horizon. The problem was the albatross, the main albatross in the picture here, was looking the wrong way. It was looking directly to the right as opposed to the left, which meant that all its face was in shadow. There was long shadows and things there as well, and it just didn't work as far as the picture was concerned. So I was sitting there cussing the fact that I knew that the light wasn't going to be around for very long. I'd spent all that time waiting for it. It was the most beautiful light, and the bird wasn't doing the right thing. But just before the light went out, it turned its head. I got one frame off, which is this frame here. And then within less than a second or so after that, the sun had gone. And all of a sudden it was like shadowy type light and things on it as well. So it's a picture that reminds me of just how transient little moments can be at times when you're trying to get a whole load of different elements and things to come together. So this is the power of the evening light in Shetland. And that evening light in that last couple of hours of the day, it just transforms everything. It means that the colors of the ground where a Magellanic penguin has got its burrow just come to light. They're just rich in terms of, so much richer in terms of color. And the light just pops off the Magellanic as it sticks its head out of the burrow as well. But those pictures are pictures that are taken using the sun from behind me. And one of the techniques that I'm a huge fan of is actually getting around the other side and using the light coming towards me. And you can only really do that when the sun's low in the sky, because it then starts to wrap around the subject that you're photographing. And here's a typical example of backlighting. What you got here is just a pair of albatross that are doing a classic bit of courtship type billing and interaction and things. But with the sun shining through their beaks, the whole feel of the bird takes on a completely different nature. The sun shining through the beak as opposed to on it, the subtlety of the whites and that lovely little bit of rim light that you can see around the edges of their heads there just takes on a completely different complexion. And even more so when you start to photograph the chicks. When you've got anything that's fluffy, that's being lit from behind, then you get this, the effect of the rim light and things on it is really spectacular. But the key to this sort of imagery is that you have to think even harder about what's behind the subject, because unless you can find an area that is darker than the subject that you're photographing, then it's not going to work. It's just going to look all bleached and washed out. This image works because I've managed to position myself somewhere where there's a bit of a bank disappearing off into the distance behind this albatross chick. And that means that I'm maximizing the contrast between the rim lit light around the bird and the background that you can see behind it as well. And so you're not just looking at where the lighting is and the thing that you want to photograph, but you've got to think about what's going on behind it in order to make the image work. And then we come to experimenting and playing around with light in a different way. And I do quite a bit of video work and have done quite a bit of video work over the years as well, particularly as soon as video capability came into DSLRs. Then rather than ignore it, I started embracing it and playing around with it and doing sort of short films and things of the things that I was photographing, mostly for my own benefit, but some of it professionally as well. And one of the common techniques that I got introduced to by a good friend of mine who's not a wildlife filmmaker, but runs his own little short filmmaking business and things as well, mostly commercial stuff. And I've seen it a lot when I've watched it on television, is you'll see very often a camera being set up, shooting into the light. Imagine this is a person and a person holding a conversation with somebody who's off screen. And what the cameraman will do is they'll just move a little bit left or a little bit right on a fairly regular basis and let the sun appear from behind the subject and completely bleach out and wash out the subject as it folds across and folds and wraps itself around the person that was standing there talking. And then they'll drift back in again and the light will disappear and all of a sudden the person will come into full relief. Now I've said that, just try and hold that in your mind next time you're watching any drama, any documentary, anything like that on television. And you'll see it a lot in the wildlife documentaries, but don't just think wildlife, think everything. It's a very common filmmaking technique. But that's a technique that relies on being able to move during the course of the shot because you're shooting all the time that you're moving. You don't do that taking a still picture. So I set myself a challenge that says, well, I like the effect of the light wrapping around a subject like that. Can I do that and capture that in a still image in a way that I know how to do it from a video point of view. Is there somewhere where I can stand and I can get that folding light working from an image point of view as a single picture? And this is the sort of start of that experimentation process for me with this black-browed albatross in this albatross colony. And what I've developed and love to do now, especially down here, because I know I've got subjects that don't mind me standing there and don't mind me moving and twisting and adjusting exactly where I stand and lifting and changing the angle of the lens that I'm holding as well, in order to get that maximum diffraction of light coming into the image. I know the subject's not going to run away. This is a fantastic place to experiment with it. And this particular image of a Gentoo penguin here, all that lens flare and all that sort of reflected light coming in from the top right hand corner, that's not a Photoshop technique. That's not something I've done on my computer. That's what the image looks like because of the way and angle that I've held the lens at when in relation to the sun and relation to the penguin itself to take the picture. And therefore replicating in a still image as best I possibly can that technique from video type work and things as well. And here's really the ultimate example of it. Boy, the colors this particular evening were exceptional. The sun was just about to set over the sea in the distance. You can see a beam of sunlight that's shining all the way across the water like that. And I've positioned myself ever so carefully to not only capture that folding of light and that refraction of light across the lens coming from the top to the bottom of the picture, but also making sure that the tufts of that rockhopper are being caught in that beam of light as it shines across from the horizon and things as well. So, and trust me, I haven't taken the saturation and slider and just gone whoosh with it. This is what the light looked like. What you see in my images is what it was at the point when I took it, even if that's only come about by consequence of the angles that I've held and the position that I've held my camera in at the point of taking it. So maybe now you're getting a sense of why at the very beginning of the talk I said I would never be bored photographing here in the Falklands, because it's all down to your imagination, and that little set of images and playing with light that way, that's entirely out of my imagination and wanting to try and experiment with it, because I know I can because of the nature of this amazing place to be and to photograph. That backlighting works well on some of the subjects that we've seen earlier. Our fluffy king penguin chicks look fantastic when they've got that sort of glowing coat of fluff around them lit that particular way. But when it comes to that particular, the award for the fluffiest, cutest backlit photograph that I've taken down there, it has to be this brown skewer chick. You can see I've got a fantastically dark background behind him, and was able just to catch the angle of the light coming onto him absolutely perfectly. And if skewers are ever required for a Ready Brek advert, then I think this one would win the part instantaneously. You can absolutely see the glow of the morning meal shining all around him in that particular picture. So there you go. That's backlighting. But the next step on from backlighting is to say, well, let's not try and get the rim light and things in here as well. Now let's just underexpose even more and turn the subject into a silhouette. And I've always had a sort of simple guidelines for myself when it comes to silhouette photography, that number one, you need to be, most importantly, number one, sorry, the exposure needs to be such that the subject is black. You need it to be pure shadow. You don't want bits of it showing or hints of it showing in any way, shape or form. It needs to be rendered completely black so that it is just its shape. Because number two rule for me is that it needs to be identifiable by its shape alone. Now, you're all bird watching experts, so you'll know that this is a skewer as opposed to a gull. But that probably doesn't matter too much in this context. It's clear that it's in that sort of arena in terms of a bird, and the fact that you can see it's a coastal setting by dint of the environment around it would probably suffice as far as that's concerned as well. But here we have penguins are instantaneously recognizable by their shape. And here is my imagination rushing off again. And I'm not only thinking silhouette, I'm also now in this particular image trying to incorporate some of that spillover of light, refraction of light type technique that I was talking about a little bit earlier, with the way that the sun is shining through the little gap there between them. And there's an old landscape photographer's technique when it comes to trying to capture a little starburst as far as the light's concerned, and that's just basically stop your lens down to f/22. And if you stop your lens down to f/22, then the natural leaves that go to make up the aperture of a lens will capture the light in such a way that if there's a point of light in your image, it will show as a little starburst around the outside of it. Anything wider than that, it won't work. f/22 is the point where it just needs to be. So make a little note of that one. This was set to f/22, as well as getting that little bit of refraction of light shining through as well, and that's why you've got that little starburst effect there in the center of the picture. As I said, it's all down to your imagination in a place like this. And I think this is my last silhouette image. This is a giant petrel that was sitting on the beach. And I popped this one in to say that you don't just have to shoot silhouettes when you've got an orange sky. You can shoot silhouettes, frankly, against any color of sky, as long as it's a lighter background than the subject and you can render the subject black, then it's absolutely fine. And here, well, the wonderful gradation of colors as the sun is just popping up over the horizon in the distance, the night's disappearing out the top of the picture and the day's emerging at the bottom of the picture. And I love that gradation through from orange to blue or blue to orange, dependent upon which way you want to describe it. And that works just as more powerfully, I think, as a silhouette than it would have done if I'd tried to capture it any other way. Now, I've talked a lot about the penguins and albatrosses, and I mentioned the two-banded plover at the start of this second half. So there's a little section on some of the other birds to be found around the islands. Well, I've done an awful lot of work with grebes here in the UK and Europe over the course of my career. So it's a family that are very, very dear to my heart. And so any opportunity to spend time with grebes anywhere in the world is one that I'll always grab. And there are 2 or 3 species of grebes to be found breeding in the islands. This is one of them. This is the silvery grebe. Sort of reminds me a little bit of the southern hemisphere version of a blackneck grebe, the combination of that wonderful tuft set of feathers behind the eye and that bright red currant type eye and things as well. And of course, if I'm only going to show one picture of a grebe, it needs to be the classic one with a chick sitting on its back and things as well. So there's a silvery grebe. This is a Magellanic snipe, well, I'm chuckling to myself because photographing snipe in the Falklands is not at all like photographing snipe here in the UK. In the UK, you go wandering around on a moorland, maybe looking for snipe, or just because you're moving through to go to somewhere else. And the first sight or sound you'll have of a snipe is when it takes off from under your feet. Because you've almost stepped on it, you didn't know it was there, it's making a load of noise, it disappears off 300 meters or so, drops down onto the ground and you can't see it anymore. And that's pretty typical of walking around in snipe type habitat. Here in the islands, well, apart from the fact you walk around and you can hear them, and because they sort of tend to be quite noisy, but if you do happen on one in exactly those circumstances, it's not going to take off and make a load of noise and fly 200 meters away. It'll take off and drop down maybe 5 to 10 meters away and then just get on with whatever it was doing before you nearly stepped on it. And then it's like, oh, I found a snipe, that's great, I'll settle down and photograph the snipe, and it just gets on with life. And in fact, the number of times I've had to almost beg a snipe to turn around and walk the other way because it's getting too close for me to be able to even focus on it, i.e. it's inside that minimum focusing distance, that's a pretty regular occurrence. So a completely different type of experience working with snipe here than working with snipe at home. And what beautiful, beautiful camouflage plumage they have. This is another one, and I'm photographed on a day, and I popped this in because it sort of just makes me chuckle a wee bit. This was a particularly windy day. I saw this bird going down to a small sort of peat pool, a pool in the peat area where it was and I was, and I knew it was heading down that way to have a drink. or dig around in the mud around the edge of it. The wind had created so much froth on the surface. It was because it was such a windy day. In that corner of the pond, there was a load of or the pool, there was a load of froth along the beach area. And so the bird had to walk its way through this frothy stuff, hence why it's lifting its foot up. And of course, I've never seen the foot of a snipe quite in the same way. I'm lying down on the edge of the pool, so I'm at snipe height, so to speak. So to see a snipe lifting its foot up quite like that, they just appealed to me. I never realized they were quite as big and splayed out, almost coot-like in terms of what that looks like there. So anyway, I popped that in because it intrigues me, and I think it's a fun picture. So, and hopefully one or two of you too will as well. Other waders to be found on the across the peat moorland here are the South American dotterel. Looks pretty similar to the Eurasian dotterel we have here, that passes through the UK or breeds up in cairngorms and things as well. Certainly around this sort of time of the year, then they'll have eggs and they'll have chicks quite shortly as well. And that's wandering around on a very, very common little plant to be found in the moorland habitats here. They're called locally diddle-dee. It's like a little berry, so it's a bit like some of the bilberries and things that you'll find across northern Europe, but it's a local one there. And diddle-dee jam is a bit of a local speciality. If you ever go down there and you're thinking of something that you might want to bring home as a present, there you go. In terms of wildfowl here, there's a number of different ducks and geese to be found. This is an indigenous species of duck called the Falkland Islands steamer duck. And I'm not quite sure why this individual is waving its wings around like that. It looks as if it's sort of attempting to or about to try and take off in some way, shape or form, but it's never going to be able to do that because it's completely flightless. It's a flightless duck. Presumably that's something that's developed because of the lack of serious predatory threat. And as I say, it's indigenous to the islands, and I guess over time, evolutionary wise, then these wings will just get smaller and smaller and less prevalent as far as the bird's concerned. But there we go, Falkland Island steamer duck. From a goose species, the most common to be found pretty much everywhere around the islands are these. This is upland goose. I see a lot of these across southern Patagonia, southern mainland South America as well. That's a male at the top and a female at the bottom. These are not generally coastal birds. These two pictures happen to be in a coastal setting, but you'll find these right at the center of West Falkland, East Falkland and things as well. So they're really the heart of the mainland type goose that you'll find spread all the way across the islands. And just to keep the ooh and ah factor up, here's some upland goose chicks. They look pretty cute, that's for sure. Still not quite as good as the Gentoo penguins for me, but anyway, goslings always look smart. So there's some upland goose chicks. Around the coastal edges, though, you'll often find the upland goose not so much competing, but alongside this particular species, and this is a kelp goose, very aptly named. Because they feed pretty much entirely on seaweed, on different types of weed, as you can see this particular female is doing here. And so they will spend their days just basically following the tide. At high tide, they'll be busy roosting up at the top end of the shoreline, and then as the tide goes out, they'll follow the tide out, and anywhere that there's weed that's exposed, then they'll tend to be the areas they'll make for in order to be able to graze as the tide's going out, and then obviously following the tide back in and things as well. So kelp goose, they're great fun to photograph. I've always enjoyed just sort of settling down and watching them battle away with bits of weed that you can see. This one here, she's having a really good shake of it, and all the spray that's going everywhere in the process as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit later in this second half of the book about wanting to take some pictures in iconic and recognizable locations. And this particular wreck on New Island, it was an old minesweeper that got scuttled there in the 1970s. Anyone who's been to New Island will know it and recognize the spot, etc., etc. And the beach is a typical kelp goose grazing beach. You can see them all grazing around in the picture there. And so I thought I want to try and get myself a picture of a wide angle picture of the boat and the geese grazing and things as well, because that will work for people who recognize the location. What I hadn't appreciated was that the only spot that I could lie and do that was exactly the spot where the freshwater stream was coming off the land and flowing down into the sea. And so the photographer had to lie in the wet all the way through, waiting for the geese to walk into position. So I was absolutely sodden by the time I'd got the image that I wanted. But it worked for me, and it was worth it. And it's a nice image, and it's got pride of place in the book, which is what I wanted it for. There are cormorants, oblique shags to be found, and this is the king cormorant, and what a stunning bird it is. An amazing, from a distance, it looks like it's got a blue eye and a characteristic yellow beak with sort of like big knobbly texture that sits at the base of it, that comes in and colors up during the breeding season. It's only when you get a little bit closer that you realize that the eye itself isn't blue. It's just a vivid area of skin around it that again colors up in this deep blue mode, deep blue coloration during the breeding season. They have some characteristic qualities to them that also come with the quiff. The quiff that you could see in the first one. I've got a little selection of portraits here of them in various poses. But the one out of all of those that absolutely appeals to me is the one in the bottom left-hand corner. The one in the top right's got a load of diddle-dee, that's for nest building. The one on the top left is sort of sitting out in the rain, but that one in the bottom left, now, if 17-year-old me would have been so proud of having my hair gelled up like that to go to school, it would have just been absolutely amazing. So, you know, I tried hard, but I never managed to pull off that particular look. Now, the chances of doing that are long gone. But as I say, 17-year-old me would have been exceptionally proud of that quiff. That's a lovely characteristic of the king cormorant, as far as I'm concerned. Spent a lot of time in king cormorant colonies. Yeah, like any seabird colony, and particularly any cormorant or shag colony, they're very, very smelly. But this was a fun picture that I spent an entire morning trying to capture at the peak early in the breeding season. They're all sitting on nests. You can see all the coloration is at its peak. All the quiffs are at the peak all the way round. And it took all morning because I was just waiting for birds to be flying in with bits of nesting material, and it took a while, but eventually in amongst the hours of lying there and just watching what was going on, I captured one with a couple of birds coming in, both carrying the material, and everything sort of felt balanced from an image point of view. And later in the season, again, a king cormorant chick is certainly not going to win any beauty pageant either. But those little tender moments between any parent and youngster, they're just wonderful to sit and watch and witness, and to hopefully capture that sort of connection between them in some way, shape or form. And cormorants are no different to any other bird species in that respect. Now, I mentioned a few slides back that I wanted to include a collection of images that for people who knew the islands, either people who lived there or had visited regularly, they would be recognizable in terms of where they were. And there were a number of different thought processes in terms of techniques to do that. One is very simply to use a mid-zoom type lens, place the subject somewhere so that it's in the landscape, and you concentrate on the subject. The rest of it's out of focus, but sufficiently in focus that if you know this particular stretch of coastline on New Island, then you're going to know where the picture was taken. So that's pretty routine, simple, straightforward stuff. The second is to start to think in the way that a landscape photographer would, and take some wide angle shots that really allow you to put the subject in the frame, but also capture a large element of the environment with it. I showed you an albatross on West Point Island in the first part of the talk. This one here is taken at an extremely iconic location on Saunders Island called the Neck. Most people who visit the Falklands do so either as part of a cruise to go down to Antarctica, or a bespoke cruise around the islands and things as well. And the Neck is a pretty regular spot for cruise ships to drop people off for a couple of hours or so during the course of the day. There's a narrow little point between where this photograph's taken and the land mass that you can see in the distance. And there's just a tiny neck of sand, which you can see sort of in that top left-hand corner between the two. So they are joined up, but only in a very, very narrow way. So by photographing this way, going into portrait mode, tipping the camera over a little bit, I'm able to say, look, here's an albatross and a very, very shy chick, I hasten to add as well. Really didn't want to be involved in the picture at all. But it's very clear that if you know the neck as a location, you'll know where that's been taken. I did the same thing on Steeple Jason, this particular bird, one of two, who I spotted sitting right up at the top of the hill. You can see a little bit of the colony down in that left-hand corner of the land, I was down at the bottom there, and I saw these two birds up the top of the ridge, and I thought that could make for really quite an interesting picture. And it's quite a climb, as you can see, to get up there. I was about 2/3 of the way up, and one of them took off. And I'm thinking, oh God, they're just going to do this to me, aren't they? They're going to let me do all the hard work, and I'm not going to get the picture. And sure enough, when I got up to this particular individual, clearly a non-breeder, and it took off, I thought, oh goodness me. But it only flew about 10 meters and settled down actually in a slightly better spot, because this lovely rock with lichen and things on was where it decided to settle. So I made my way slowly and carefully over towards it and set it up, thinking very, very carefully to make sure that I put it as tight as I possibly could into the bottom right corner of the picture, to leave me as much space to get as much of that iconic ridge that gives Steeple Jason its name in, as far as the rest of the picture is concerned. Making sure that the toe at the bottom foot isn't getting clipped off the bottom of the picture, and the tail feathers on the right and not being clipped off the right-hand edge of the picture as well. Looking around the edges is really important when it comes to photographing and thinking that particular way. But you can give a sense of place in an array of different ways. And you can give a sense of place actually by having tiny things in empty spaces. And these are the sorts of images that I encourage people to take, but I encourage them not to get depressed when they look at them on the back of the camera, because to be honest, an image like that looks absolutely awful on the back of the camera, because you're looking at it at about a 1 inch to 2 inch sort of like size. And so the penguins are so damn small in it, you can barely see that they're there. And I always say to people, just check, have a look, zoom in, make sure the penguins are sharp, and then wait until you get home. And I don't know what devices that you guys are looking at that on. I'm looking at it on a MacBook screen, and it's a reasonably good size. And as soon as you see it in a size like that, all of a sudden the image starts to work. Now, I've done this talk actually down in the Falklands in the cinema in Stanley, and it's the same talk that I'm giving to you this evening, but I've done it there a couple of times now. And when this image goes onto the screen off a cinema projector, and I'm talking about a screen that I don't know how many feet it is from one side to the other, but I think there's about 15 seats in each row. So that gives you a rough idea. The first time it went up onto the screen, I actually had to leave the lectern and go into the audience just to look back at it, because it was so flipping huge. It was filling an entire wall. And the whole point of the image was at its absolute greatest, this vast expanse of sand with texture in it, because the sand's blowing around all over the place, and these tiny little penguins in it. So you can give a sense of place in an array of different ways that are not very obvious. One of the ways of capturing that sense of place is by making sure that you're incorporating the environment and the subject in the image. And I came back from a trip 4 or 5 years ago, it must be now, where down in the Falklands, and I'd taken this particular picture of a king penguin, and as I was sorting through the material from the trip, I kept coming back to this one and thinking, there's something about this that I like, and I can't quite put my finger on why I like it. I mean, it's nice enough. There's a nice sky, nice setting. I've got a bit of sea cabbage in the foreground, and the penguins walking through, and it's got a foot raised, and which means it's a sense of walking and all those sorts of things. But why is it sort of stimulating something in my mind that I can't quite put my finger on? And eventually I got it, because it reminded me of the sort of image that I take when I use a camera trap. It looks to me as if that's the sort of place you would nestle a camera with a couple of beams, so that when a penguin walks through that little gully or across that little gully, the beams are broken and you take a picture. Very, very typical of a camera trap type of picture. Now, of course, in the Falklands, you don't need to use camera traps because nothing's bothered about you being there anyway. But my imagination and everything said to me, well, actually, what I'd quite like to do is to take try and see if I can capture some images that look as if they've been taken using a camera trap, i.e. that sort of style, but I haven't had to use a camera trap in order to do them. I'll just take them by my being there. And so the next 2 or 3 images are examples of that sort of thing. On Sea Lion Island, I know a little runway through the tussock grass that a number of Gentoo penguins have to waddle along in order to get to their colony. And so I spent a very enjoyable afternoon lying in the tussock grass off the path and photographing the birds as they waddled by. And the key to making the image work for me was these out of focus bits of grass hanging down in the top right-hand corner, because it makes it feel to the viewer, or it does to me anyway, as if the camera's hidden in the grass. It's hidden in the grass, and as the birds go by, click, 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 it's taking the pictures of them walking on by. You know, and an entire afternoon, I took loads and loads of images. This was my favorite. Got a nice dynamic movement, the one on the left. The one in the middle has got its nice foot up, and it's the little framing of the one on the right in that out of focus grass that's just stopped to have a bit of a itch or a scratch or something that's just sort of nicely balances the image off. But it feels like the sort of image that could have been taken with a camera trap. I had to go back to the beach where I'd done the king penguins and try the whole thing consciously rather than subconsciously. And so I looked very, very carefully at where I could position the camera and position myself as this little group came waddling along through the sea cabbage once again. It really feels to me as if this is a group of penguins that are just walking through the shot. It's got a lovely sense of movement and purpose as far as what they're up to. And the camera's hidden away here in the sea cabbage. And I don't mind the fact that you can't see all of that penguin on the right. The fact that it's hidden behind that bit of cabbage almost sort of makes the point of what I was trying to do with it. And that one that's not quite made it into the picture on the left-hand side is all part and parcel of that whole sort of camera trappy type thought process as well. And here's the last one. And this is the other sort of context within which a remote camera might get used. And that's at a nest site. So back at West Point on this particular occasion, and looking for a nest that I could hide the camera or give a sense of the camera being hidden in the tussock grass as the bird sat on its nest as well. And in many circumstances, that out of focus blade of tussock grass that's running from the top left-hand corner down to above the head of the bird would really, really annoy me. But in this instance, I actually think it contributes to that whole camera trap feel that is out of your control. And it's just been taken because the bird's taken the picture by moving in some way, shape or form. Anyway, probably all that does is give you an absolute confirmation that I'm a bit mad and batty when it comes to my photography, but it does perhaps give you an insight into the way my mind works, and then sets me off down a path to try and create a different sort of set of style of images and things with these wonderful birds in this wonderful location. I always want images that are about telling stories. I look for that very much so. And a powerful story of skewers and at sunset here and parent is very much what that image is about. And skewers are part of that predatory tier of birds that make life difficult for the penguins in particular. And all the way through the breeding season, skewers they time their chicks very deliberately, and they time their egg laying very deliberately, as they do here. And the proximity of where they lay their eggs is right in the heart of and around penguin colonies. And whilst they're busy incubating, they'll be looking to steal eggs from penguins. And so you get this constant harassment of, in this instance, rockhoppers by skewers flying over above and literally looking for an opportunity to dive down and grab an egg. And then once their own eggs hatch, then they're doing exactly the same thing, and they're looking to pinch the chicks off the penguins and things as well. So they're timing it very, very carefully. And it's always pretty gruesome to see, particularly in this instance. This egg was probably just on the verge of hatching. Most of the rockhopper eggs in that particular colony had hatched, so it was very, very close to hatching. The images before this particular one were pretty gruesome, but that's the role of a predator. And as I showed you a couple of pictures back, they've got their own chicks to feed, and that's nature, red in tooth and claw, etc., etc. There are some vulture species to be found here, the turkey vulture, and they're generally less killers and more cleaner uppers, as befits vultures. This one here is homing in on a Magellanic penguin that's died for some reason. I'm not quite sure what. You know, very, very typical of what their role is in keeping the ecosystem nice and clean. But the smartest predator of the lot has to be this fella. This is the striated caracara, or Johnny Rook, that I showed you a portrait of in earlier as well. And the intelligence of these birds when it comes to predating, in this particular instance, a gentoo egg, is quite extraordinary. And here is a bird that has just managed to predate a young rockhopper chick from a nest. I watched this bird for over a 20-minute period or so, walk up to the outlying rockhopper nest that was on the edge of the colony, just walked up to it and waited until the penguin had a good old peck at him to make him go away. And he just took 10 steps back, stood back for another 30-40 seconds, and then just moved in, slightly different angle, and waited for the rockhopper to have another little go at him, and then just moved back. And the process kept going on and on and on. And I noticed after about 5 or 10 minutes that gradually what this caracara was doing was unsettling the parents sufficiently that every time it went back, having had a little go at him, it wasn't quite going all the way back to protect the young. And so after a 20-minute or so period, a gap of about 8 to 10 inches between the rockhopper parent and the rockhopper chick opened up. And all of a sudden, from left field, the partner of the caracara, the other bird, whizzed in and picked up the chick and flew off with it, and the two of them then disappeared off with it as well. They were actually hunting together, one gradually pulling the parent away from the chick, and the other bird that was out of sight but watching what was going on picked its moment, flew in, and took the chick off and away. So it's difficult to watch. It's never nice to see. It's challenging to photograph, but a little bit like the sea lions that I showed you in the first half of the talk, you cannot fail to be impressed by the predatory instincts and capabilities and intelligence of these birds and the way that this particular attack took place. And again, they've got their own chicks to feed too. I talked about storytelling pictures, and this is a typical of an image that took about 5 or 6 nights of setting up lights in a location and making sure that everything was okay and it wasn't disturbing the birds, and then getting the right sort of evening sky to try to take a picture that says life goes on even when the sun's gone down here. You know, it's inexorable. During this breeding season, it pretty much never stops. And so the sun has set, but the rockhoppers are still coming in and out of the sea at this particular point in the day too. This shot here is all about the isolation of being an albatross chick, and it's a pretty rough sea there. It was at the end of a very, very violent storm, and a number of chicks had been blown out of their nests. A number had died and things as well. And it's very, very tough going back into a colony after an event like that. And so I wanted to try and capture something that told of the challenges that these young chicks face. I also wanted images that touch on those tender moments too. That's tender moment between a young king penguin chick, that I've been very rude about them earlier in the talk, and I apologize profusely, because in this particular image, that bond is so clear and so strong that I forgive what it looks like. It's irrelevant at that particular point. And I often want to present images in little montages as well, because you want to tell the story. If you're trying to tell a story, sometimes 4 images tell the story better than 1. So put them all together as a collection. The harassment, I talked about gentoo chicks hassling their parents. Well, here's a pair of Magellanic chicks hassling a parent on exactly the same reason. Parents come back, those chicks want food, and they'll do anything to be the closest to mum or dad, and to get mum or dad to bring that food up as well. I mean, they all work perfectly well as images in their own right, but put the 4 together and it really tells the story in a different way, that's for sure. And I like trying to capture iconic images and present them in a different way. One of the iconic images that you may well have seen from the islands is this famous rockhopper shower. It's a little area where a freshwater stream quite near to a regular rockhopper climbing up and down point to a colony is, and the freshwater stream drops over a little ledge, so to speak, and so the birds will very regularly come and stand in the freshwater and clean all the salt and muck and things off their feathers and things as well. I've seen them do it in all sorts of different locations, but sometimes that's just driven by whether there's been any rain and it doesn't last all through the season. But this stream flows pretty much every day all the way through the year as well. So it's a very, very common occurrence at this spot, and that is very much the typical shot of the rockhopper shower. But I like sitting in a different spot and trying to get a different perspective and a different angle. I love the little single drip getting down on the one that's having a preen on the right hand side, and the picture on the left is actually my Salvador Dali moment, because and you won't be able to see it on your screens, but on my screen, if I zoomed in really large on that particular water drop, I can see my reflection taking the picture just there in the image. So that's my Salvador Dali moment with rockhopper penguins, that's for sure. I also like to I talked about montages of Magellanics in the quiet moments when the light's not great or not a lot's happening, or I'm struggling for inspiration for whatever reason it may be. I like to look down at the ground and just take little images of what I see around my feet. And they can look really nice when you box them together in this sort of way. So, if you're ever feeling a little bit flat, just take some sort of little details of where you are and put them together and present them in this sort of way, and actually it can tell a story in its own right in a completely different way that they would ever work as individual images. I don't think any of them would work individually, but as a collective, for me, they work quite nicely. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on as far as the islands are concerned, and I've talked about all the wonder of the wildlife and the wonder of the locations and all those sorts of opportunities, but the element that is constantly changing and impacting on everything is the wind. It is probably one of the windiest places that I've ever been, and the wind is always shaping life. It impacts on whether you can get onto an island, off an island, whether you can even get to the Falklands or get out of the Falklands at times as well. It can be that significant. And so for the birds that live there, it shapes and influences all of their behavior. And so when it blows and creates its own different dynamics in the environment, it's something I love trying to capture. And this Gentoo penguin battling through a really strong blowing sand on a beach is typical of what I'm talking about as well. This poor king penguin is just trying to recover after however many days swimming at sea. It's trying to get some strength and energy back. It's dropped off to sleep on a beach, but every 5 minutes it has to lift its beak up and shake it in order to get all the sand that's building up around it as it's blowing in all over the bird and things as well. You can see too, then it's not being given an easy chance to catch up on its well-earned rest. Nobody ever asks about the poor photographer that's lying there in these circumstances as well, because they don't count, because they've chosen to put themselves there, and I guess that's fair enough. It's the wind that creates that dynamic seas that those poor rockhopper penguins that I talked about in the first half have to battle their way through in order to make their way onto the shore. And it's the wind that creates the dramatic waves that allow the flying masters, such as in this instance, the giant petrel or the albatross, to demonstrate just why and how they are so good at what they do when it comes to flying through the air. Now, the weather doesn't always involve wind. Very occasionally you get dank days, and where the cloud will sit and there'll be a little bit of drizzle, and actually you really want the wind to come back to blow it all and clear it all away. But I quite like working in those misty conditions because they give images a different mood and feel. And here's a fairly typical example of that. I did turn it into monochrome because I sort of thought it made it a little bit more powerful. And you're left with this question as to, yes, there's a bird, it's a cormorant, it's flying off from the shore, but just how high up into those clouds do those cliffs actually go? It sort of leaves you with that sort of sense of intrigue. And that's what's nice about photographing in misty conditions. But of all the elements that the weather can impact on here, and the one that I actually think is really, really spectacular about this place is the skies. Whenever I come back from the Falklands and back to the UK, it feels like the sky's closed in. The skies in the Falklands are just vast. It's because there's not a lot of trees in the landscape. And actually, wherever you are, there's barely any buildings either. So you've got a relatively flattish landscape with big, big skies all over you. And the weather and colour that can come in those skies is really exceptional. This had been a big, big storm. I'd hunkered down and sheltered it out for the couple of hours that it was going. But as soon as it finished with me, I headed down to the beach because I wanted to capture it as it disappeared off into the distance. And the wonderful contrast between white sands and almost black sky, clouds and things in the top of the image with that vibrant blue sea in between times, and obviously windy, sandy covered penguins as well, is really typical of what I'm talking about. And even on just a general threatening day, the soft tones of grey and blues in the sky really make this image. You know, if that was a blue sky, bright blue sky with a white fluffy cloud in it, it just doesn't work in the same way as those dramatic colours and gradation of colours that the greys and the blue of the sea and things allow to bring into it as well. And sometimes the images just simply have to be about the sky. Yes, there's a little group of king penguins in here, but what a fantastic sky that is that they're actually in. And it's an early morning sky, so it's just before the sun is about to come up over the horizon. But just fantastic cloud formations as well. And so I had to sort of like make sure that the sky dominated in the picture. I had to take some pictures of the penguins as well because it was such a beautiful morning and they were just standing in such a beautiful location. So here's the shot that's all about the penguins. And there's the one that's probably my favorite of all, which is the sort of hybrid of the two, where I've managed to get a lovely little group of penguins. There's a nice bit of reflection in the wet sand too. But it's very much about the sky that makes that picture work, and the impact and the scale of that sky is absolutely stunning. And when it comes to drama, well, you don't get a sky that's any more dramatic than that. I mean, that's a big, thick old cloud and storm that is coming in. I mean, I couldn't have made the picture more about the sky if I tried. I mean, those penguins are tiny in the frame, but that's a big old sky. And unfortunately, where I had to get back to shelter for the night, because this was back at the end of the afternoon, was about a 30-minute walk from that particular spot, and it was in that direction as well. So I was gambling how long I could leave it to make sure I got the best out of the sky, but didn't get absolutely soaked as I headed back to where I was going to be sleeping. But it's the sky, the beaches, the empty nature, and the beautiful wildlife that, for me, make this place so special, and why in 8 days' time I'm heading back down there for the third time in the last 12 months. I've got a small group that I'm taking down for a tour, and I really can't wait to be wandering on these empty beaches with this wonderful wildlife again. I do hope you've enjoyed the tour. This is the book, and I've got a copy of it here. Well, I'll leave the cover on there. It's this sort of size. You can see the sort of size. It's I don't know, 150 odd pages as well. It was published in conjunction with Falklands Conservation, so there's a big chunk of the cover price goes to support all their work down in the islands, and in order to allow me to maximize the amount that goes back to them, the only place that you can buy the book is on my website. You can't find it on Amazon. You won't get it in a bookshop. I've self-published it, and it all sits entire. All the stock is sat at my house, or what stock there is left is sat in my house. And if you go to my website, which is simply my name, Mark Sisson Photo, photo.co.uk, you'll find me if you stick me into Google it easily enough as well. You can find the book online, and it automatically sorts out the postage cost based on your address. So if you've enjoyed the images, you want to see more of them and read some more detail about some of the stories behind them, then that's where you can find the book, and you'll be supporting Falklands Conservation and their exceptionally important work in these wonderful islands in the proceeds. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you this evening.